Sunday, September 11, 2016, marked 15 years since the terrorist attacks on the United States, and the town of Westford held a 9/11 memorial service. Because of a torrential downpour just minutes before the service was to begin, all in attendance moved from the 9/11 memorial in the public safety courtyard into the Westford Fire Station. Veteran Service Officer Terry Stader.
As part of the firefighters' tradition, there's a sounding of 4 sets of 5 bells to indicate the last call. Since we're inside, we actually won't be ringing the bells. So we'll take a moment of silence. Thank you. Honor Guard parade rest. Since a number of these events were determined to be outside, we're moving them in. So at this point, we'll have one of our firefighters read the firefighter's prayer.
When I am called to duty, God, wherever flames may rage, give me strength to save a life, whatever be its age. Help me embrace a little child before it is too late, or save an older person from the horror of that fate. Enable me to be alert and hear the weakest shout, quickly and efficiently to put the fire out. I want to fill my calling, to give the best in me, to guard my friend and neighbor and protect his property. And if according to your will, I must answer death's call, bless with your protecting hand my family, one and all.
Thank you. Nancy Cook is going to now be reading the poem 1 by Cheryl Sawyer. It's in memory of all who perished on that fateful day.
1 by Cheryl Sawyer. As the soot and dirt and ash rained down, we became one color. As we carried each other down the stairs of the burning building, we became one class. As we lit candles of waiting and hope, we became one generation. As the firefighters and police officers fought their way into the inferno, we became one gender. As we fell to our knees in prayer for strength, we became one faith. As we whispered or shouted words of encouragement, we spoke one language. As we gave our blood in lines a mile long, we became one body. As we mourned together the great loss, we became one family. As we cried tears of grief and loss, we became one soul. As we retell with pride of the sacrifice of the heroes, we became one people. We are one color, one class, one generation, one gender, one faith, one language, one body, one family, one soul, one people. We are the power of one. We are the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. At this time, in recognition of all those who perished back 15 years ago on September 11th, 2001, a member of our fire department and police department will be bringing up a wreath to place next to the podium here. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Representative Jim Arciero, who will give us some parting words. Thank you.
This morning, we gather to mark the 15th anniversary of that fateful day in 2001, when events in New York City, Arlington, Virginia, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania would forever change America. We will never forget where we were Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Whether we were dropping off our kids at school, preparing for a big presentation at work, or any of the many routine and ordinary things we do as individuals and families in our everyday lives. We could never have imagined the impact or be prepared for the acts of that fateful day. A day that would change our lives forever. A day when the horror of war would come to America's shores after experiencing many years of relative peace, isolated from international conflicts, forever changing our view of the world and our nation's place in it. That dark day when thousands would perish in unbelievable ways, when buildings we thought would last forever would crumble in hours, when the center of our military might, the Pentagon, would be struck, and when American heroes would sacrifice themselves in an airplane to protect others. A day that would ultimately lead to wars in the Middle East, where thousands of brave men and women would enlist in our military and would answer our nation's calls to defend the United States and the world from those terrorists who committed these horrific acts. September 11th, 2001 would also hit us here at home, when we would lose two of our own here in Westford, Susan McKay and James Hayden, who were on American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175 that crashed into the World Trade Center. We will always remember where we were when we heard that awful news, with those unforgettable images permanently imprinted in our minds. And we will never forget those who sacrificed their own lives in the line of duty in order to save those in peril. The first responders, the police, the firefighters, those brave men and women who led our rescue efforts during these tragic events. There is no doubt that the horrific acts of a few were surpassed by the heroic acts of many. In this unbelievable tragedy, the best in American people were demonstrated. Today, 15 years later, millions of people from around the world continue to stand united with us. That the destructive agendas of radicals and extremists shall never eclipse the blessings of liberty and freedom. Today, as we mark those 15 years that have passed, we will continue to remember what transpired on that September morning. And we will never forget those lost, those who sacrificed, those who served. 15 years later, with memories still fresh in our minds and sorrow still felt in our hearts. We can honor this memory by embracing our loved ones, our families, our friends, and our neighbors. United by our love for freedom and the American way of life. And by doing so, we can heal just a little bit more as a nation. May God always bless our country and the souls of those lost on that day, and all the lives forever changed by those tragic acts. And may we always remember and learn from the events of September 11th, 2001. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Representing our Board of Selectmen, Andrea Peraner-Sweet would like to speak as well.
Thank you. Never forget. That is the phrase that has become the watchword on this 15th anniversary of 9/11. Never forget. 15 years since the day dawned bright and beautiful. I still remember vividly. It was one of those days where it was crystal clear, it was sunny, the sky was a deep blue, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. 15 years since the peace of that day was shattered. 15 years since the United States faced its gravest and most deadly attack. 15 years since more than 3,000 people were killed. 15 years since our nation was shaken to its core. We stand here today remembering the evil of that day, remembering the loss of life, including two of our own residents, Susan McKay and James Hayden. But let's also remember the firefighters, the police, the first responders who courageously and selflessly ran into those towers. The countless acts of kindness and compassion that we showed to one another, strangers helping strangers. The expressions of support that came from all over the world. The feeling that despite our differences and disagreements, despite our political parties and viewpoints, on that day, at that time, we were one nation united. Let us remember that as well. And as we think about the fact that there's now a whole generation of people who did not live through that day, whose only knowledge of that day is what we pass down to them, let's ask ourselves, what do we want to teach our children? What do we want them to know? Let us teach them that in the face of the evil of 9/11, the true spirit of 9/11 is love, compassion, and sacrifice. Let us teach them that, as was subsequently declared, 9/11 is a day of service, a day to perform an act of kindness. Because an act of kindness, no matter how small, will impact the recipient of that act far beyond the effort it took to perform that act of kindness. Let us remind them of the dedication and commitment of our public safety officials, our firefighters, police, and first responders who keep us safe and who on that day, without hesitation, bravely and heroically walked into a maelstrom of fire and terror. Let us tell them that America does not give in to fear. We rise up, we face our fears, and we are stronger than ever. Our spirit cannot be broken. Let us teach them about resilience. Let us show them that once there was destruction, despair, and ruin, new towers rose again, people returned, and life resumed, proving that once again that the United States really is the home of the brave and the land of the free. Let us tell them that love, hope, compassion, freedom, liberty really does conquer evil. Let that be the legacy of 9/11 that we remember and that we pass down to our children as we never forget. Thank you.
This concludes this morning's service. I would like to remind you, now that the rain has let up, to view our 9/11 memorial here in the Public Safety Courtyard, as well as the benches in honor of our two residents who passed away that are just behind the cannon on the town common. And thanks all for participating in the brevity of the program as we had to move it inside. Again, this concludes this morning's program. Honor guards, take care of your troops and dismiss them. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.